So in this video, we're going to talk about the dark side of the music industry and if the music industry is a safe place for people who believe in God or Christians. So stay tuned.
Beauty is irrelevant.
What's going on YouTube? It's your boy, Jarrell, Relevant King here, multi-platinum music producer. And in this video, we're going to talk about the dark side of the music industry. So this video is going to be a little different from other videos because it's going to be more of a personal testimony about what I've experienced since I started working in the music industry and where that has led me to today. So just to give you a little backstory, I don't know if any of you guys like believe in God, if you guys are like atheists or like whatever, you believe in a different religion or whatever it is. But I was raised in a Christian household. I was raised in church. I went to church from a very young age. You know, once I got to a certain age, when I started driving, my aunt used to take me to church, and then she told me one day, I'm not taking you to church anymore. You have a car, you can drive yourself to church if you want to go, and if you don't go, that's between you and God. So me naturally being a rebellious 16-year-old with a car, I stopped going. And then one day, a good friend of mine, Brandon, Crash, great talented artist, shout out to Crash, invited me to church. We were in a Christian rap group at the time called So True. We were fire, don't sleep on us. And he came to school one day and he was like, hey man, you wanna go to church with me on Sunday? And he said, my pastor told me that if I loved my friends and didn't want to see them go to hell, then I would bring them to church on Sunday. And that meant a lot to me. So how could I say no to that? So I went to church that Sunday. And that Sunday, the pastor talked about the book in the Bible called Revelations, and it scared the crap out of me. It was so crazy to hear that story, and he was like, he definitely sold me. And at that moment, I started going to church, and you know, I was going to Bible study. We used to go to something called Tuesday night Bible studies for the youth group. We had a great youth pastor, Brother Teray, and he was someone that we all looked up to. Our pastor ended up showing us this video, and it was kind of like a documentary mixed with a sermon by a guy named G. Craig Lewis, and it was called The Truth Behind Hip Hop. And in this video, in this sermon, he goes on, I think it's 2 parts where he talks about all the crazy things that happen in the music industry in regards to rituals, prayers that are like hidden messages within the songs, sacrifices, people worshiping the devil, the way that music is used to influence the population by having these secret subliminal messages in it that all end up ultimately leading people to live in the flesh and worship the devil. At the time, I thought it was a little exaggerated and weird, and like they were blowing stuff out of proportion, and they're like taking things way too serious. But looking back at it now, it was right. Everything about it, it's all true. It's crazy to even think about it, but I mean, I've been there, I've seen it, I've experienced it, and you might not think that it is as bold or obvious, but when you look at the things that happen, you know, people following these certain rituals, again, having hidden messages and having these dark things going on in their lives, the stuff that they're even talking about, you know, like all these relationships that people are in that don't have God in them, and the heartbreak and the twerking and the partying and the drinking and the smoking and just all of that, man. It just all was right, because all of that stuff, all it does is just continuously feed the flesh, and it pulls you further and further away from God. And you know, I watched it, but it did have an impact on me because I did listen to some of the music. I was a big fan of some of the music, like rap music at the time. So some of that stuff sunk in because I could see the negative things that were taking place within the music and how it could be used to manipulate, spread lies, and change people based off of what's being said in the music. And at that same time, since I was learning the Bible, it was easy for me to see how Lucifer could come to earth and be in charge of the music scene and the music industry and manipulate people in a negative way to pull them further and further away from God. And specifically in rap music, and specifically when it comes to the black community, because rap ultimately came from the black community. Hip hop culture all started with, you know, more so the black community, and in this country we have had it the worst, and music hasn't helped at all. I mean, sure, we created hip hop, but the message that's typically spread in hip hop is usually very negative music. It didn't start off that way, but it's like that primarily now. So I started making beats and rapping when I was 14. So at 16, 17 years old, I was way better than I was when I first started, and I was very confident in my music making abilities. And I knew where I was going. I knew I wanted to be in the music industry. I knew I wanted to be a music producer. I didn't care to rap so much, but I knew I wanted to be in the music industry. I was graduating high school. I ended up going to LA. I got my certificate in audio engineering. You know, I went into the music industry. I started producing. A production partner of mine, we moved out here and we started going for it. You know, it went from just working in the studio, recording people, to actually producing and putting together songs and pitching these songs to record labels and trying to get these songs sold to the labels for the artists that were on the labels. And everything was cool, but living in LA, coming from a small city, it was very easy to get caught up in like the new age is what they would call it, belief of what's going on out here. So like, I wasn't a heavy Christian at the time. I still don't consider myself a super Christian. I'm not super religious in that aspect, but I do consider myself a believer in God. And I would come out, you know, I would be out and talking to people, and sometimes God would come up, and I would meet plenty of people who believed in God, but at times I would also meet people who say like, oh, I'm not religious, I'm just spiritual. And that was always like the cool thing to say. Like whenever you're out here, it's like politically correct. It's like you can't really go wrong with saying that. Like, oh, you know, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. So hearing that and hanging out with different people in the industry, you know, going to parties, meeting celebrities, wearing certain clothes, you know, certain designer outfits, and the lifestyle part of what it was to be a musician in the industry, it can be very easily influential on someone who is new to the scene, new to the city, coming from somewhere else, not necessarily aware of how things operate and how things could go into your spirit, go into your mind, and you start picking up different ways of thinking based off of the people that you're around. I went from being someone who believed in God to then becoming someone who was not so religious but spiritual, and then ultimately completely just being a new age spiritual, I don't know, believer. And it was so simple. Like I didn't even really see it happen. It just happened. It's almost like the boiling frog effect, where they say you put a frog in boiling or regular water and you turn on the heat and then slowly turn up the heat, and eventually the frog dies because they don't know that they're being cooked, because the heat is just slowly getting hotter over time. And I feel like that's exactly what happened to me. I went from having my own relationship with God, believing in God, praying all the time and talking to God just on a regular basis, to not praying at all, not going to church at all, and not really hanging out with people who went to church or believed in God either. Or even if they did say they believed in God, they were like practicing like new age stuff, like burning sage or burning Palo Santo, or wearing crystals and focusing on chakras and manifestation and all that kind of stuff. Like, and not to say that there aren't some spiritual principles to some of those things, but none of those things involved God, specifically like following Jesus. And you know, if you read the Bible, if anyone does read the Bible out there, it says the only way you get to God is through the Son. So getting caught up in all of that, next thing you know, I'm like falling into the whole new age belief of like spirituality, and completely not even thinking about God and having a true relationship with God based off what the Bible says. And I'm pretty strong-willed when it comes to what I believe in, so it's not easy for me to just typically like adapt to or adopt someone else's beliefs. You know, I have my own way of thinking about things. Even when it comes to Christianity itself, like I don't typically just take things for as people tell me. I like to do my own research and do my own studying on how things work. So at one point, that's exactly what I did. I just read the Bible. I read the entire Bible, but I did it as an audiobook, and I recommend you do the same. It's so easy. It took me 3 weeks. If you work a regular job or anything like that, just put the audiobook on and listen to it. It's super easy to listen to. But I ended up reading the Bible, and it shifted my whole perspective on everything that I had heard, because I know a lot of times people take scriptures out of context. So by listening to the whole Bible, it really brought me to a place of understanding what the whole purpose is of believing in God. And it came down to 2 things. The first one was faith, and the second one was love. So after understanding what it was all about, I was way more receptive to the Bible's teachings, just because at a basic level, even outside of a religious mindset, the world needs way more love than it has in it right now. And to even believe in God, regardless of if you're spiritual or not, you still have to have faith. So that's what that led me to, and that's what I took away from that. And it was something that leveled me out and brought me back down to earth. So naturally, me being me, after reading the Bible, I questioned everything about it being legit. I'm like, who wrote this? Why are there different versions of it? Why are there like a King James version and like this other version, and like who is King James? So I went down this rabbit hole of like learning the history of the Bible and like what came before the Bible and what were other people studying and all this other stuff, right? And ultimately it brought me all the way back full circle. I still ended up following the Bible. And at that time, fast forward, I was watching some YouTube videos and I came across this guy, Mark the Messenger. Shout out to Mark the Messenger. And I was watching one of his videos and he was just talking about how important it is to have a relationship with God. And at the time I was smoking weed heavily. I was still kind of like just lost in the world and kind of caught up in the music industry, going to parties, drinking a lot, being very lustful, and just kind of being in the world, like hanging out with people, taking shrooms and like just doing all of these other spiritual practices, but never really focusing on building a relationship with God. And one day I was listening to a video on YouTube and I heard two scriptures that completely shifted my mind on the music industry and my life itself. Was in the book of 2 Timothy chapter 3 verse 1, and it talks about men being lovers of themselves. And when I think about how I was acting at the time, and when I think about when you listen to music, especially rap, all it is people talking about themselves and the things that they have and the things that they're bragging about, and the cars and the money and the girls and all this stuff. And it's like, this is cool, but it's not given. None of this stuff is yours. Like, one, when you die, you can't take any of it with you. But two, like, God is the only reason any of this stuff is here, like including the earth itself. So like, for it to say that, it just kind of made me start to question how much value listening to that type of music was adding to my life, and then what message was it spreading to everybody else. Now it's one thing to, like, again, grow up listening to rap music, people talking about guns and all that kind of stuff, but there was still other music that had a lot of good substance in it. And so I was a big Lupe Fiasco fan. I was also a big Kanye fan, and Common, and rappers that still talked about stuff that actually had some meaning to it. Now, the second scripture that actually shifted my whole perspective of where I was at in life and how I was looking at the music industry is in Galatians chapter 5, verse 19. And I'll post a picture of it here on the screen. But it talks about something similar to number one, which is men being lovers of pleasure. And at the time, I was definitely a lover of pleasure. All I wanted to do was just like play video games and smoke weed and like listen to music and just like do things that like excited me. But I was realizing that none of those things lasted. They always ended and then it was gone. It wasn't like something that was just a constant feeling. It was just like a temporary feeling that would be there while I was in the moment, and then eventually it would all be gone, and then you'd have to go do it all again to get that feeling again. And after like really taking some time to process that, it just really made me think that that's not how I want to be living my life. I would rather be doing something that was helping me grow and become better, and that was fulfilling me internally and forever, rather than just being something that was temporary that would ultimately go away and that I'd have to keep chasing it. And I was like spending a whole bunch of money on weed and like hanging out with a bunch of rappers in the studio where it's just blunt smoke all in the air and like tobacco, and like I had a bunch of like mucus in my throat and all of this stuff, and I was just really thinking like, is this really making my life better? And I was like, what benefits am I actually gaining from this other than just like fitting in with the crowd? Then I also heard another scripture that says, do not conform to the ways of this world, but be transformed in your mind, and to not try to be filled with all these things of the world, but to be filled with the Spirit. And as I'm hearing all of these things, it all just started clicking. This entire industry plays off of people spreading the same message over and over and over, which is just live for yourself, live your best life, get this money, have a bunch of sex with a bunch of random people, and none of it is actually teaching you how to like not only build a successful life for yourself here on earth, but how to build a relationship with God. Because at the end of the day, we're all gonna die. And when all this stuff is gone, it's gonna matter way more what happens when you die than the stuff that happens here on earth, because it also says in the Bible, on earth as it is in heaven. So it just really shifted my mind on the music industry. And once I started making these videos and started working with musicians as a music coach, I felt that it was part of my responsibility to not only teach someone how to make a great song and not only teach someone how to be a successful business person, but to also teach people that you also have to have a purpose while you're doing this. And that purpose shouldn't just be for your own self-desire. It should be to glorify God, because without God, none of us would be here in the first place, and we're all part of God's plan. So I don't know who this message is for. I don't know if you guys even believe in God, but I'm gonna keep making more videos like this, because moving forward, I wanna make sure that I'm guiding people in a way that is going to, again, heal them and bring them closer to God, and not just focus on them being lovers of themselves and chasing money and all of these material things in this world, because all of that stuff is material, and it honestly, it attracts the wrong people. You know, if people don't like you for who you are in your heart and in your spirit, and more so they only like you because of your popularity or your success or what you can do for them or the car you drive, and those people aren't really the people you should have in your life to begin with. So it is what it is. If that's not who you are, then you know, this channel won't be for you. But if that's where you're at and you want to continue to grow in your music career and also grow in your relationship with God, then that's where this channel is going to go from here on out. And I'm still learning a lot of this. I'm not some super like pastor that knows all these Bible scriptures or anything like that. I'm rather just kind of taking what I'm learning, seeing how it applies to me and where I want to go in my life and in my career, and sharing it with you. And if you want to go with me on that journey, then we'll go together. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be making more videos like this soon. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and if you found this valuable, share this with a friend or a family member. It would mean a lot to me and the channel. And if you have any comments, comment below. I'll be happy to hear your thoughts on it. And if you also are needing some help with your music career and are struggling with building a fan base or coming up with a sound or marketing and getting more views or getting more streams, and you need a music coach that can help you with that and help you put together a strategy to help you start generating income so that you can eventually turn your music from a passion to a full-time business that you can live off of and do full-time, then click the link below in the description box, and there's a link that says book a call, and you can book a call, and we can get on a call and have a strategy session where we map those things out for you so that you make sure that you're hitting the goals that you have for yourself. So that's all I have for you guys. Thank you again for watching the video. I'll see you guys soon.